Idolet Teacher Education Center. And this is a superintendent's workshop. We have a lot on the agenda. And Dr. Moore, before we begin, could you just give our community, what is the purpose of a superintendent's workshop?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The intent of this meeting is to provide the opportunity for the board to come together and look at items that will come before them for approval in an upcoming workshop. Typically, we like to keep these items a month or two in advance. This gives us the opportunity to do a couple things. First and foremost, advise the board individually to receive their feedback and then present them during this meeting, this workshop, collectively as a whole to once again receive feedback. And then at the upcoming meeting, the next month, we'll have the opportunity to make any revisions to ensure that all the items that come before the board have been fully vetted. All board members are aware, and they have the opportunity to engage in meaningful conversation that is informed and aligned to their system of beliefs.
All right, thank you. You may begin with our purchasing and contracting for commodities and contractual services.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first three items will be presented by Mr. Fagan. That's A, B, and C, and he'll present each item and respond accordingly. Mr. Fagan.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Through the chair, to the board, thank you very much. I have three small items. One is policy 6320, just making a slight change in the policy, removing a specific person's name to send public records request to, and putting it simply to the public records individual or department. So simply removing an individual's name. Second item is a new serving line at Dodgertown. The lines are about 15 years old. They're outdated, can't fix the parts that are there. Take about a day to replace it. It won't interfere with food service for the day, cost about $69,000. Last item is interlocal agreement with the City of Vero Beach. This is a $1 million donation from the City of Vero Beach to the district to help with the construction of the stadium and the ESE playground at the Graves property across the street from Vero Beach. Any questions?
Thank you. Board members, any questions on ABC or comments?
Just thank you to the city.
Absolutely.
Just one comment. Where are we as far as the donations for the Joe Graves Field that we are using as a school district with many opportunities?
So we have, in addition to this $1 million that the board will be receiving this evening, you also have another $1 million contribution coming in, another $500,000 from FBL, and other small donations. So in total, we're about $2.8 million collected to this point. As we come into the new calendar year is when we'll actually begin our public strategic fundraising initiative. So to raise $2.8 million in this silent phase is something that we're all very, very proud of. Coming through partnership, the city has really stepped up in a huge way. They're funding the creation of the playground. The other $500,000 would go towards the stadium itself. So this is very, very exciting. Still a lot of momentum continuing to talk through this project. A real positive buzz.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, next we have Mr. Bass.
Mr. Bass will present, well, pretty much all remaining items.
All right. First item I've got is item E, the MOU with IRCEA. This is the funding that we received from the state for teacher allocation money. If you recall, we did get to 47.5 the first year that was required or pushed for by the state. Last year and this particular year, we got additional funds to pay to teachers since we'd already met the 47.5. We got 1.25 million. When allocating that per the formula that was provided by the state, that moves our annual base salary up from 47.5 to 47,907. Annual contract teachers got $874 increase. Professional services contract teachers got $1,165 increase. And that money's already been paid out to those individuals. Any questions?
Any
So
questions?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Zahara.
So for purposes of understanding for those people who are not understanding what professional services contracts is, can you please explain that?
That's anyone who has their certification and was no longer on annual contract after July 1st, 2011.
So for the most part in our district, those are the more senior teachers
More
who have
senior
been here,
teachers. Yes,
who
ma'am.
are not. Okay, so again, just for understanding of where we've been in the last few years, Some new monies, I suppose, came down, so that came from the state asking us to bring new teacher salary to 47.5 a few years ago. That did not include any increase for professional service contract teachers, which were the more senior teachers.
The first year, we were able to
We were
apply
able
some
to
money.
do that.
Yes.
We were able to do that almost immediately. I think we were
Yes.
one of the first districts to be able to bring, what?
Yeah.
One of
Five.
5 districts statewide to be able to bring our teachers to where they needed to be at that time, which was 47.5.
Yes, ma'am.
The new teachers, new teacher salary starting. And then I think a year or two later, we kind of right-sized as much as possible, from what I understand, so that our more senior teachers got a little bit more money, because when you increase the new teacher salary to 47.5 and not do anything with our more senior teachers, that gap in between, the experience and the non-experience kind of, it shortens. It becomes smaller.
Compression.
And so what I'm hearing now is that we're kind of making that gap a little bit bigger again, or at least the state is ensuring that we are giving, in this case, the salary increase to our more senior teachers and a little bit less to our new teachers once again.
Yes, that's correct.
Because this is something that has been an issue for me in terms of the difference of salary. And I understand that there are requirements for how this money is to be used, and it's not like, we can say, okay, well, we've just received this amount of money, let's not give it to new teacher salary, let's give it to something else. You can't do that when there are restrictions to what is, given to us. But personally, my concern has always been the gap between the new teacher salary, or the less experienced teachers, and the more experienced teachers. And you know this, we've had this conversation before. I've said it, publicly before from the dais, the gap seems to keep closing, and a new teacher salary with 20 or 30 years experience is just a few $1,000s, really different, not too much. From the less experienced teacher. If you're a senior teacher, 15 years, you almost want to say, well, why am I doing this when I can quit, start over on a zero salary and get just as much, although that's not exactly the case. But I know that there are some other factors that take into consideration what teachers get. It's not just what's on our salary scale on the teacher salary, when you look at that chart. So my question is, first, I'm glad that we are giving senior teachers more money here in this case. I'm glad we're giving all of our teachers an increase, but I'm glad that we're recognizing the more senior teachers, or the professionally contracted teachers. The other thing that I'd like to ask is that we take a look at, and I know we've talked about this, take a look at that chart that is in our salary schedule. The chart in the salary schedule only has base salary. It doesn't include the increases that you get if you are, whatever you receive at the end of the year based on your evaluation.
Performance pay.
Your performance pay. It doesn't include that. So can we re-envision what that looks like for a new teacher, since we're talking about retention, as retention is an issue. Hiring and retaining teachers. If we want to hire teachers, the first thing that a teacher from out of state or out of county does is they look at the salary schedule. The only thing in this case that they'll see is this one chart. It doesn't show a lot of difference. It's only that base. It doesn't show all the other factors that may come into play. Can we recreate that so that we are saying, as an example, if you have 10 years of experience in another district coming into Indian River County, what might that look like? We're not giving an exact, but the idea is to show the possible actual salary versus just the base.
Yes, ma'am.
Does that kinda make
We can illustrate that. What you come in, what's the base is, and then effective, you add this much. Highly effective, you'll add this much. your master's degree, and things like that.
Yeah.
So they can, I mean, for each person it'd be different.
Yes.
But they
Yes.
could add it up and see where they would end up at.
Right, but the idea is just to kind of, I don't want to say entice, but that's exactly what we want to do, is we want to say, look, this is why you should come and work for Indian River County School District, as opposed to someplace else that might have that, because people aren't going to read the fine print as much as, looking at these charts and saying, oh, that's what it could be. Thank you.
Thank you.
You skipped D, buddy. D.
The-
Well, D just had everything listed I was going over
Okay,
today.
all right, I'm sorry.
Well,
All right, Ms. Berenbar,
Yeah,
go
I have a
ahead.
question, two or three, actually. How many years' experience can people bring in now? I know there was a cap of 10 years for a while. Is there a cap again, or is it open?
It's open.
It's open. Okay, good. And then, could the board get a list of, by county, the average salaries for teachers in the state and also the highest paid? I know St. John's is up there. So if we could look at that as well as you go into negotiations, that would be a nice thing for the board to see, I think, and for the public to see as well, comparing us to other counties.
Yes, ma'am, we can get that.
Okay.
Point. Anyone else? We used to have that as far as our salaries with master's, doctorate and so forth. It just gives an indicator. And I know the performance incentive, obviously you can't put that at every level because you don't know if the teacher's going to get it, but just to see that it's there would be pretty good. Okay, now we go into the transportation agreement and bus purchases.
Yes, ma'am. Through the chair, we have two items for transportation today. The first one is the agreement for the TRIO program. This would be transport SDRC students to Indian River State College. The TRIO program is a college readiness program that's designed to help first-generation college students, low economic students, and students with disabilities to continue their education. This is a 3-year contract. It's a great program. Very familiar with it in another district and how it worked. And we would assess them the standard SDRC rates for transportation. Any questions?
Board members, any questions on that first part?
Okay, next item is a contract for a bus purchase off the state bus purchase bid. We would like to purchase 8 total buses. 6 of those buses are 77-passenger buses, and they're fueled by propane. And then 2 of those buses are 71-passenger buses with wheelchair lifts, also fueled by propane. This is in our capital budget for this year. This is, each year we buy buses and try to roll off some of the older buses, so we are, have an up-to-date fleet.
Okay, board members? Yes, Ms. Rosario?
The bus purchases, weren't we going to scale back on those so that we can pay for the turf?
We scaled back. We usually get 10 buses.
So I'm having trouble getting online. That's why I'm just going off of terrible memory from
Okay.
what we've talked about. So the purchasing of the new buses, there's a recommendation in terms of timeline. I've always had a concern with this. So there's a recommendation in terms of the timeline when school districts, especially Dr. Posca, who is new to the board, so welcome, Dr. Posca, to your first workshop.
That's right.
The purchasing of the buses is usually, I think, they say that within a few years, I think it's 8 years or something like that, that they would then recommend the purchase of a new bus. I'm not sure if I'm right on that year. But these diesel buses, some of them are diesel, have the tendency of having a longer life. And we have stopped those purchases on other occasions in terms of board voting so that we can use those monies in other places. That has happened before on the previous board, because that could be upwards of millions of dollars, where if you don't need to purchase new buses, why are we doing that? So are we, and I know that in the past, Mr. Fagan might remember, I know that in the past, we have asked for a full review of the cost benefit of waiting for example, this year, not purchasing new buses or some new buses so that we can reserve some of those monies and put them in other cases. In this case, we're not purchasing 10 buses new, we're using that money for the turf. So how can we be fiscally responsible in this and not put student safety, at risk? Because you definitely want to make sure that they are riding buses that are safe.
I
So
believe,
where do we, what is that line?
I believe was it last year or before last, we did not purchase any buses?
We did not.
2 years
years
ago.
ago.
We took a year off.
Right.
So, best practices is 8 to 10 years to go,
I was right.
transform out.
Yeah.
And, we have right at 100 buses in fleet. So, by doing 8 to 10 a year, then we're on that 10-year cycle. So, I mean, and looking at, you also, when you take into consideration how much repair you're doing on the same older buses consistently over and over, I mean, it's going to add up really quickly. So,
But are we doing that? Are we doing the job of monitoring?
Yes, ma'am.
How many buses need so much maintenance? And those
yes.
are the buses that we need to replace, as opposed to just saying, well, our 8th year is here, let's just
Oh,
buy
no.
a new bus.
No, it is a very intense decision as to, yeah, this one's up to cycle off. However, it's running well, and we've got one that's 2 years younger that's giving us problems. So yes, we will move that one out and jump it ahead.
And then if you can remind me, what was the other discussion that we've had recently about switching from diesel or getting a gas tank? Propane.
Yes, ma'am.
Going from propane?
Well,
Could you just
we
remind us?
We went from diesel to propane, much more environmentally sensitive. Also, the buses seem to run better, and we can get that propane fuel at a lesser cost. It doesn't fluctuate as greatly as diesel fuel does. So,
Especially in this economy.
yes, ma'am.
So all of these new buses that are being purchased are going to be propane
Propane.
buses?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Ms. Berenborg?
But I did ask you about that with the diesel. Why are we keeping diesel buses? And you gave me a good answer.
Yeah, because we do have to go sometimes where it's beyond the fuel capacity of the propane tank. So if we took those buses, then we wouldn't have a way to refill them. So we do need to have some diesel buses still on hand so when we go on long trips, because they can stop in at a filling station and fill up.
Mr. Barefoot? Dr. Pasca, any questions? Just a couple. So when are we looking at getting that fueling station? I know we had talked about it for a while, and then is it off the capital outlay? I don't remember seeing it.
It is off our radar at this time because we did put some feelers out for pricing here recently, and it has gone up tremendously.
Okay. And I understand we're getting 8 out of the 10 buses. I visited the bus depot, it's probably about 6 months ago, and talked with our lead mechanic, and he had concern about the buses soon coming out of warranty. And I know then we start bringing in our new ones, because as we all know, safety is the most important thing for our students, so we want to make sure they're good to go on that. So I think that's all I have. Anyone else? Okay, Mr. Bass, keep going.
All right, next item is G, and this is all the contracts. And the first item is the weight room equipment for Vero Beach High School. This is a complete exchange of equipment of what they have now, which is in failing condition, pretty bad shape, to benefit the athletic programs and all the weightlifting classes. It's in the capital budget. Anticipated completion of this, if approved tonight, would be late February.
Any questions about the weight room?
Just a comment, the weight room, no.
Okay.
Okay.
So
All right,
how much was the weight room?
126,000.
Is that typical for our schools that we spend about that much, or how much was the other school that we?
Sebastian was 76, so Vero Beach High School is going to help bridge the gap there
Okay.
on the amount difference.
One suggestion or thought I have is that we may have other potentially unexpected costs that could be critical. it may be beneficial to phase out the worst equipment and maybe do a smaller order, and then next year complete the order. It's just something to consider.
Thank you.
Can I ask what other costs do you think might come up that would be a concern?
Well, fencing was one of them.
Well, the fencing, I think, is included in this, right?
Well, I think we're about to get there, I
Yeah,
guess.
I
Yeah,
have a
we're
question
getting
about the
there.
fencing.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, we're good on that part?
Wait, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Fencing in terms of
Perimeter fencing?
not the sport fencing?
No, no.
No. And Dr. Poska, it'll be two different funding streams there for the fencing and the away equipment.
Okay.
Okay. All righty, go ahead, Mr. Bass.
All right, next item, cell tower lease at Treasure Coast Elementary. This was an item that was brought back to you all. Just a brief synopsis of it again, it's 2,500 square foot area in the corner of the southwest corner of the property at Treasure Coast Elementary. Be a singular lease, paying the district $2,200 a month, and it increases annually by 2% each year. The initial term is for 15 years. There's a possible 3-term total of 15-year each. It is within a safe proximity of student and staff. It's over 600 feet away. The tower will be 146 feet tall, and the tower is also engineered that if it were to fail, it falls straight down. And, you know, as we had talked about in our board briefings, this is a way to generate revenue for the school district, but also, too, if gives us an opportunity if we ever had to put a radio repeater somewhere, and for particularly buses or two-way radios, we would have the ability to go to AT&T or Singular and put it up there, because if we did not have that tower close by, we would have to go and pay rent to someone to put it on their tower, which be $1,000+ a month also.
Okay, any questions? Ms. Berenborg?
Yeah, I'm the one that pulled this item last time, and I've been assured that it's safe for children to have this tower that close.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and we've done the research and the studies.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So I would like to comment a little bit. I mean, I very much appreciate looking for ways to generate revenue to support the education. I think in the case of non-ionizing radiation towers, there is extensive research in 1G, 2G, 3G. There's minimal research in 4G and almost no human research with 5G. There has been some extensive conversations and some publications in the literature about 5G and 4G, though. And I'm not speaking to misinformation out there, but actually journal articles you can look up. So in mice, they did show that 5G and some 4G frequencies do induce behavioral changes in mice, including depression. Additionally, they found cellular changes in the auditory cortex of the brain, including mitochondrial swelling and other issues. I think since there's maybe a small chance it could be dangerous, and the revenue does not appear to be, in my opinion, very significant, I would caution just focusing on the health and safety of our students. And I think if we were probably to poll the parents of that school, they probably wouldn't want it, would be my assumption.
Interesting.
Okay. Ms. Rosario or
Thank you
Mr.
for that.
Barefoot?
Yeah,
That's why I pulled
that's incredibly interesting, and I wish you would have been on the board last month. I mean, we can always poll this to do the polling. I would fully support a polling of the parents in light of this new information. I'm just receiving it, so
Yeah.
I need to kind of process it, but there seems to be legitimacy in what you're saying, and obviously your expertise in this area would be one that I would defer to,
Okay.
for sure.
So,
Dr. Jones?
go ahead, Ms. Berenborg, I'm sorry.
That's why I pulled it last time, because I had concerns about 5G, I agree with you. I didn't know all the specifics, but I have heard some of the studies about 5G, especially being around children. So,
I mean, this is not something that we have to have. I mean, we can just discard it and not even pursue it.
do we have property somewhere that's farther away?
Off the top of my head, I think we do, but it may not be where a cell service tower needs to be, based on what their needs were. So, I mean, again, I mean, my thing to you, if you all have this much concern over it, I say we just pull it all together and not worry
Sounds
about
good to
it.
me.
Yeah, I'm okay with that, and then maybe it makes sense to go back and look if we do have other properties where they would want a cell tower that's kind of out there and not near anything. I think it's worth evaluating.
Okay, it's not a problem.
There's really no other benefit other than revenue.
Right.
Revenue and then having it available if we needed a repeater.
Repeaters are very nice during hurricanes and cell signal outages. Yeah.
We went through this whole thing when I was mayor of the Shores, and not a lot's changed since then. There's always people that are concerned, I think, when you're dealing with children, as opposed to perhaps adults, which is the primary population in Indian River Shores. Probably caution is, even if people perceive it as an issue, then it becomes an issue. It's not worth $2,200 a month to create concern on the part of parents.
No.
Okay, not a problem. All right, next item is Sebastian River High School fence project for perimeter fencing. Martin Fence Company is who came back with the bid, and if there is a area of Sebastian River High School, for whatever reason, we don't know, was never fenced along the south side of the student parking lot, and I believe it wasn't fenced because there's a pretty thick tree line there and also a pretty steep V-ditch. You know, in looking at the safety of our campuses, we figured that we probably need to put one there, and so we moved forward with getting this bid out. And then also there are two areas in the northwest part of the campus that we're putting some fencing, some additional fencing also. The work is scheduled to be done over spring break, and it is a 6-foot high fence, but I think there's going to be some discussion on the height of the fence.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Dr.
Sure.
Plaska.
So in my understanding, I think best practices is really an 8-foot fence. And I know along the lines at some point that did change over the last several years. But I think it probably would make sense to start building from an operational standpoint fences that meet the best practice. So I would I think it's great that we're finishing the perimeter fence. That's awesome. But I would encourage us to go to the current best practices and you know, anytime we're building a new fence, meet the best practices and probably come up with a plan to improve some of the other fences over the next couple of years.
Okay, Ms. Berenborg?
Yeah, I did a walkthrough of Vero Beach High School this past week, and I noticed that we have really short fences in the back of that school. Anybody can throw anything over that fence,
Yeah.
which is a concern. So I agree with you. I think we either need to heighten the fence line or do something as far as security for that, for both high schools, or all our schools actually. But
And in the meantime, obviously, it could be a huge expense, and there needs to be a plan. We need to get that out, and it could take time. A good middle ground is you could increase patrolling around the outside of the school until we have our fences where we really feel they should be.
Okay, Mr. Barefoot?
Hey,
Ms.
nothing to add.
Rosario?
Yeah, I mean, an 8-foot fence is certainly safer than a 6-foot fence. I mean, some of the gentlemen in this room are more than 6 feet. Some, Dr. Moore. And it's easier to just jump a 6-foot fence than it is an 8-foot fence. So I can see that, and I suppose it's one of the other reasons why I keep mentioning some of the other ways to cut back on as much spending as what we're doing, because, again, if you don't need some of these buses, for example, then that money could offset some of the safety needs for a fence. Like, you know, we have to, I guess, weigh the pros and cons of all of our decisions and make sure that we are making the right choices. But in this case, certainly an 8-foot fence would be the safer route, indeed. I'm going to add to this discussion too, as we're talking about fencing around Sebastian River High School. JROTC is kind of, their building is secure in terms of they have their own little fence around the back and this side over here. But they don't have anything around the front, and I'm sure they don't need it, but had that come up in any discussions? Because they're kind of off to the near road area.
When I got here, I looked at that, and that is, and you see that in a lot of school districts. They use the building as part of the perimeter. I mean, some of our other campuses have the building as part of the perimeter also. So, looking at how you would completely fence that, or I don't know how you can fence it and keep it tied in. I mean, I'm sure it was built in that location for a reason. It would have been nice if it was built within the entire perimeter.
I'll tell you, the one thing that's more concerning, because they do have a good fencing, they have these gates on, going in, where they almost look like bars. But the students have to walk, right, across the parking lot to get to JROTC, and they have to walk all the way back. It's almost like an extra 5-minute walk, other than whatever the bell gives you, and some kids wind up late if they're on the other side.
Right.
But anyway, so walking that walkway, I mean, it's a shame we don't have a more secure fenced-in walkway for the kids to get from one building from the main building to JROTC. I think that's part of the conversation. I don't know if there's an easy answer in this conversation here that we're having, but I certainly would recommend that we kind of think about that.
We can definitely look at it. Going back to the fencing thing, then I think we need to pull this tonight also, because we're going to have to go back
Get the
for
cost.
pricing
Right.
for the increase.
So are we suggesting, board members, that 8-foot fencing around all of our schools?
I think at some point, we should meet the best practices, and we probably need to sit down and have a conversation to determine a plan to do so. But I think for right now, if we're going to build a fence, we should probably build it up to that standard to start with.
Okay, Ms. Berenborg?
Yeah, have you talked to law enforcement at all about the height of fencing? Does it need to be higher?
The FSAT, or excuse me, not the FSAT, but Florida statute says a minimum of 5 feet. And, what we have seen typically throughout schools is 6 foot. Now, because we have got 3 new municipalities and a county, we would also have to, I'm sure if we went to them and said we wanted it this height, it would be fine, but we would have to go through the zoning to get it to the height we wanted also. So, but going back to your original question, 5 feet is the minimum, and that it really doesn't give a maximum or a recommended.
Interesting. One other thing, Dr. Pascas knew, but he mentioned maybe saving from the weight room to this. But this is coming out of capital funding, right? What funding is the weight room coming out of?
Weight room's coming out of capital, but this is coming out of the security.
Oh, security
the
money.
safety and security money.
Okay, so there's 2 different
Okay.
pots of money. So school finance is kind of interesting about pots of money.
Okay.
You'll learn. So I understand you wanting to save money from one to the other, and that's totally understandable. But I think in this case, it needs to come out of something from capital. So something else from capital needs to be put on the back burner if we want to increase the height of the fence.
One thing I'd like to add,
Not
and I don't
necessarily.
think that we, when's the last time a new bus came to us? Because I think we had orders last year, but we didn't get a new bus. When's the last new bus that came to us?
Yeah, we would have
Got a
got some this year,
Yeah.
because it was the year before last that we didn't order any.
Yeah, I
So I mean,
called
if we
on that.
place, if we place the order now, it'll be August,
yeah, yeah.
September before they get here.
So the 8 that we want to roll out, it'd be August or September before they get here.
On some rare occasions, you get them earlier in the summer.
Okay.
Some rare occasions,
Okay.
but that has not been my experience over the years.
And maybe you could research, the 8-foot fence to see where we start and then go from there.
Yeah, I mean, it would, and I'm sitting here, and Dr. Moore and I are having a little sidebar here. It would be nice if we could approve it with the, you know, that we're going to have, make it 8 foot, but a not to exceed amount. But I really am not very comfortable
Yeah.
even trying to say what that amount would be. We just bring the item back.
Ms. Rosario, I
Whole.
agree. I agree.
Yeah, I would agree to just bring it back. I
Yeah.
mean, because you might come back with some recommendations for an 8 foot and a 7 foot. I mean, you never know. You might have anywhere in between in terms of recommendation that we would look at, and you could say this far exceeds what we are capable of paying for now versus, you know, we've already established where we're going to be able to pay for this, and it is doable for the 8 foot or something less. So I would definitely, I wouldn't feel comfortable approving something that we're not sure how much the cost is or
Okay.
what the product is going to be. I would also add, with regard to the other fences, if we're going to come around to safety on some of the lower fences that we have, I think maybe the 5 foot might have been for elementary school, because that's not going to cause any. I think the idea is that fences cause some, you know, deterrent, you know, factor, but it's not going to keep anyone safe. Anybody can jump a 5 foot fence for sure.
You know.
However, what I've seen is, instead of pulling down some current fences that are not 8 feet, there are some ways in which they have extended, like on top of a fence, something or other. It's like an extension to the
You
fence.
can raise the height of fencing.
Okay, there you go. See, I don't know the proper wording for it, but at some point, you know, that might need to be a discussion if we need to raise the other ones. If our standard is to bring it up to current practice for all of our schools, then I'm sure there's a way to do it rather than rip the whole thing off and start over.
If there's a lot of, it's like a lot of other things I can tell you, the zoning requirements in the city are different than, Vero Beach are different than Sebastian. I know they're different than the Shores. You're liable to end up with potentially, I mean, who knows, three different, 4 different, depending on where the school's located. So besides the cost, I think getting the zoning thing cleared up first is probably the most important thing before you spend a lot of time figuring out what higher cost. Let's find out what's the maximum you can put in a location before you go out and spend a lot of time worrying about it.
Right. Yes, sir. Okay, we'll bring that back to you.
Any other comments on that? All right, Mr. Bass.
All right, next item is Fellsmere roof replacement. This is a contract with Garland Design Build Solutions. We're looking at approximately 16,000 square feet. Work will begin ASAP if approved tonight, and hope to have this completed sometime during Christmas break. This is one of the ones that we didn't get to because of time this past summer, and putting it back on here to get it done now. And we do have a cycle that we go on for roofing, for maintenance and repair, and then also replacement, and this one needs replacing.
Any comments, questions?
I assume you've got the contractor lined up, because trying to get anything done right now, although it's starting to loosen up, it's still a challenge.
We have, and for a couple of other items here that I'm going to bring up to you, we've kind of put them on notice that, if approved, we need you to get on it quick.
That's, you notified them. If they agreed that have put on notice, they're ready to perform?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
What does that mean, put on notice? Like,
Like, it goes
Have
to
to
you
do
guys
it,
on
like, right
December.
away?
It goes to you guys on December 12th, and we want you starting maybe on the 13th. We want you starting quick as you can.
Otherwise, next time, go to a different contractor.
Yeah.
That's putting on notice.
Mr. Bass?
Okay, next item. All right, this is a big one. All right, so this is our artificial turf and beach volleyball at Vero Beach High School. Go through, I got a couple of pages of notes here for you. The company that we're bringing to you is Hellas Construction. They are the largest sports construction contractor in the nation. We'll start with the Citrus Bowl and the turf. The reason, or excuse me, let me go back to Hellas. I told you all in briefings, but just so I can say it publicly, this is the company that supplies the artificial surface for the Dallas Cowboys, Houston Texans, Los Angeles Rams, Los Angeles Chargers, Las Vegas Raiders, and the indoor facilities at several NFL teams also, including Miami Dolphins. You know, while we're bringing this to you guys, you know, I can think of a couple of different instances of, you know, we had to move a Vero Beach High School home game this year to Sebastian. That was due to the rainfall that occurred prior to the first hurricane we had this year. The field was just completely inundated with water. The material that the grass is on at the Citrus Bowl is not very permeable. It's kind of marly, it's kind of a clay type material, and the water doesn't perk down. And so on your football fields, you will have a crown built on your natural grass fields. And at Citrus Bowl, we have drains on the sidelines. And you could, you know, at the height of the wetness on that field, you could go over those drains and there was no water running into them. So everything is just getting bogged up there. You know, there's a couple of really bad places on the visitor side from about the 25 to the 35 on the hash marks, and then out the 50-yard line. So that was the first situation. And then, you know, just for this most recent playoff game, we had 2.5, 3 inches of rain earlier in the week, and it's still boggy. If you were at that game, you could see how chewed up and everything it had gotten. So we have that. Also, the big thing is the width of the Citrus Bowl. So at Sebastian River High School, obviously that was built much later than the Citrus Bowl was built. From the inside of the track on one side to the inside of the track on the other side, you have 250 feet. At the Citrus Bowl, from the inside of the track to the inside of the track across, you have 181 feet. There is, and soccer fields have a minimum standard that the field can be in size, and the Citrus Bowl doesn't even meet the minimum standard. However, FHSAA has allowed them to hold home soccer games there. So what that does is that puts them putting the sidelines of soccer as far out as they can with just 18 inches to 2 feet of sideline before you get on the track, which is not very safe for student athletes at all. Also, the wear and tear on the Citrus Bowl, you know, I looked at it on it's to say average school year, you could have as many as 105 to 115 athletic contests on that field per year. You know, that for Bermuda grass, that is a hard year. And then your recovery time, you know, we'll start recovery in April, but then we're back at it in August. So it doesn't have that much of a recovery time. The design of this project is really interesting. There's 5 key features. The first one is something, and I'm using their industry names here on these items here, but the first one is a cush drain, which is the base material that this field is built upon, promotes shock absorption and prolongs the life of the turf. The second item is the Wave sports pad, and that was the little plastic piece that I showed you guys that will, where's that? You see it? Oh, there it is. That the turf will sit on, that is going to give it up to a 68% more shock absorption than if it were just on hard material underneath. Then the Wave is interfilled with something called refill, which is a pea gravel that provides the support it needs, plus the drainage is very permeable. Then we get to the Ecotherm, which is the infill material that is within the grass, and makes, you know, this grass will be standing up, and that infill is up to about ½ an inch to the top of the material, and it absorbs shock again. It absorbs 70% of the water that could be standing on it, which in turn reduces the heat on the turf field by upwards of 30 degrees. Then the last item is each of these little fibers is a helix-shaped twist, which is also going to provide foot stability. So, I mean, this is the top of the line material that we could have. The turf total for this is $2.1 million, and that's before a discount that, or excuse me, yeah, before a discount that we are getting. And we got the discount because we coupled this project with the beach volleyball court. If we talk about the beach volleyball, and there's a diagram of what the field would look like. You see it there? Then if we move to the beach volleyball courts.
I have a question. Oh my gosh, so sorry.
If we move to the beach volleyball courts, currently the Vero Beach High School beach volleyball team practices and competes at the Vero Fitness, which is, I think they also call that the Jungle Club. Hellas would also, this is what they call it, isn't it? I think it is.
Formerly known as the Jungle.
Formerly known as the Jungle Club, thank you. Hellas would provide a turnkey product there. And if you look, that's what the layout would be. And if we need to, we can go to Google Earth and I can show you exactly where that's at. But it would be 6 courts. And the reason why we would do 6 courts is it is enough to hold a tri-match. Brooks, if you could zoom in up there. Now go up a little bit, right here, in this area right there. And if you can see that, that is not a very good material there to try to grow anything on. I believe someone said that was the old transportation complex.
Yes.
So the construction of that would, and it's a pretty simple concept, is you go in and you excavate out upwards of 20 inches. Then you put down a barrier that would help keep moisture out and also prevent weed growth coming through. Then you bring in 18 inches, and that's the NCAA standard, the high school standard of depth of sand. It'd be cleansed beach volleyball sand, be white sand. The standards or the posts that hold the net up would be concreted in, the NCAA quality equipment and netting. Hellas would provide all of that in this price. Also, we would be doing a shade structure in that area too, so the players would have a place to get in and out of the shade, out of the sun if they needed to. And we would have, in the price is to build a sprinkler tree or like a water station where you could wash the sand off and stuff. Having a daughter that played beach volleyball, you definitely want them to wash off before they get in your car to take them home, and the house too. And I didn't go over the time. Let me back up the timeline on the turf field. Again, putting them on notice. If this is approved, then we would start construction on the turf field in May, right after graduation, and it would be ready for the next school year. If this is also approved, we have put Hellas on notice that we would need them to start on the beach volleyball courts as soon as possible, with the expectation that in March they would be ready for competition and practice. They may have to start practice at Vero Fitness for a month and a half, but in March they should be ready. Vero Beach High School girls beach volleyball team finished 2nd in the state last year. It had been a club sport for several years before. Last year was the first year it was a FHSAA sport. So the total price is $2.38 million for both, and that's after a $76,000 discount we get from Hellas because we had put them both to, coupled the projects together. And, and through briefings that talked to you guys, this is not money that we have set aside and budgeted just for this project. This is, if you can understand my rationale, this is old money that has been saved or captured by not spending everything that we budgeted for projects. For example, I've got an item coming up to you here as amended, which is almost $400,000 of contingency money that we had set aside for the project at Gifford. We didn't spend any of that money. We didn't do any change orders, owner-generated change orders, so that money comes back to us. So those type things is what we would pay for this with. And we have 2.6 million available that we could go in and do this project, and it's 2.3 million. You know, in looking at this and then also assessing other athletic needs at this school and potentially at Sebastian also, another thing that we're going to look to see is to put a golf hitting station or bays in the same area out here. You know, it's not in this contract. This would be something that we would do in addition to this contract if approved, because, you know, then we would have a practice facility for all sports at that school, except for bowling will be the only one, but I believe is that a club or we're not building bowling alleys, not right now, maybe one day. But it would, I think it would go a long way to enhance the athletic program at Vero Beach High School. And then, you know, if we do this at Vero, then, you know, I've had long talk with Mr. Cummings at Sebastian, and their natural surface field is absolutely amazing. The recovery it has, the material that's underneath, but they have a need too that we, you know, Mr. Westenberger and I have already started looking at how to address that, and their need would be their practice facilities are not very good at all. Brooks, can you go up to Sebastian? And we would go in and regrade, irrigate, and put Bermuda grass in at Sebastian on their 3 practice fields. So you see there where it says Sebastian River High School. All right, so you can see the three fields. So you've got one running left and right. Go back up, 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 up. Keep going, keep going. There you go, right there, stop. You see one that's got lining there for a soccer field. Then you got one to the right that runs long ways. Mm-hmm. We would go in, and I'm not sure when this picture was taken, but I'm sure it's been several years ago. Those fields don't look anything like that right now. They are weeds, they are anthills, they have holes in them, and bahia grass, and we would go in and redo all of that. The other thing is beach volleyball. In talking to Mr. Cummings, you know, right now there is not an interest in beach volleyball at Sebastian River High School, but I told him as soon as there was, we would get them courts there also. And you can see right there where it says Sebastian River High School in almost the center, bottom center of the screen. We've measured out, Mr. Westberger and I have measured out, and we would be able to put 6 courts in that area, just like we would do at Vero.
I have a couple questions.
All righty. Board members. Ms.
Okay,
Berenborg.
keep that up for a second. So in looking at that in the future, you know, any spectator area?
Okay, for the beach volleyball?
Yeah.
So the beach volleyball, what beach volleyball parents and spectators do is they bring a pop-up tent, and they sit just to the outside of the courts.
So there's enough area there?
There would be space there.
And same thing over at Vero
Yes, ma'am.
Beach? Okay, and then the other thing is, can you go back to Vero Beach High School football? That first slide you had of just what there you go. Are you widening that? Because you talked about the width of it.
This gives us a space because since we would be widening it and taking the track out.
Okay, because
so-
we'll have the track over at the complex.
Yes, ma'am. And I have spoken to the track coaches and talked about possible scenarios for the 22-23 year. They may be, if we don't get the other track built by then, we would be looking at an alternative site for practice for them that we would transport them to daily.
Dr. Posca? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so the width of this is going to be, we're going to solve the width problem that you
Yes,
talked
ma'am.
about.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
And then extra beach sand. So where are you going to keep that? Because there is a need for that, and also, do you have enough room to have that as storage? You're going to have to cover it. Did you think about that?
Extra beach sand.
Yeah, I mean, the sand goes.
Yeah.
We have a hurricane, you're gonna have
we
to
c-
replace it.
Yes, we can order more, and we will definitely have a location to put it, to save it. So, if back at that site, the old transportation complex there, I'm sure that we could, run about 4 courses of brick up and do like a bay and have it set there, just like they have at Sebastian River High School for their clay, for their ball fields.
Right, that's what I was thinking of. Where would the cost of that be? How would you replace that?
For the
cost?
extra beach sand?
Yeah.
We would budget it. I think we would budget it. And,
In the sports budget?
Yes, well, yes. However, well, no, it wouldn't be the sports budget because the field maintenance budgets are through capital also.
Okay, it's capital.
So, yes,
Okay.
so, but we would budget out enough, every couple of years to replenish.
Thank you.
Ms. Rosario?
Actually, if you can go to somebody else, because I
Okay.
just want to finish my
Very
thought
quick.
here. Thank you.
Sand, there's a little high demand for sand at the moment.
Yeah.
And what's appropriate for the beaches that have been destroyed on both sides of the state. I'm sure you don't have the same environmental considerations that you will have to find sand for the beaches, but make sure that they really have access to sand before otherwise you're going to end up with
Yes, sir.
18 inches of. The other thing is, when you start talking about growing grass, and this will become an issue with the soccer stadium or the Graves Field Sports Stadium, because we're going to put grass turf there. I assume that somewhere in the district, you've got someone that really knows something about grass,
Yes, sir, we do.
because between Quail Valley and Johns Island just hired a new golf course superintendent who's one of the top half dozen people in the state, according to the USGA, in the country, not the state. So there's a lot of expertise here if you don't have it. So when you start spending a lot of money, the root system is usually what's the problem, and a lot of these root systems are, only 2-3 inches. You want them at least 6, particularly if it's going to get a lot of use. So I'm sure that the person in the district probably knows some of these golf course superintendents that they can rely on, but if you need any introductions, just holler.
Well, actually, the individual we contract with to maintain the athletic surfaces, he also works with all of the golf courses, particularly Quail Valley, Johns Island, and several of the others. So I feel pretty confident in his knowledge base and his expertise, and then also, too, he can get somebody in if we need to get
Well,
somebody in.
that's the point. We were blessed. We have a lot of expertise here. And this climate is not the easiest climate to grow grass in. And what you put on the field and what you put in the perimeter are 2 different kinds of grass, so, okay.
Just a few comments. Obviously, been to most of the games at the football stadiums, and this is an absolute necessity for Vero Beach High School. Even the last game, I think Dr. Moore was there. I don't know if you were there. I know Ms. Berenborg was there. If you looked at that field, you worried, yeah. Because 2 years ago, when I walked up there, the other team almost pulled out of a regional playoff game. So it's an absolute necessity for safety for our students. I'll be watching carefully to make sure we're being equal with Sebastian River High School, and I know that you've talked to Mr. Cummings, I appreciate that, and those practice fields, I don't think they've ever been worked on, Mr. Bass. I don't think, not in the 11 years I was there. That combination with the volleyball, the beach volleyball, I think is excellent, getting kind of combining that together, but when we sit here as board members and look at what we can do for our students, number one is safety, and I think being a former associate director at FHSA, we're always looking for safety when we choose fields or tracks, for state finals. So I think it's very, very important. So commend you for moving forward on this because it's been needed for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Rosario?
Thank you. So when I agree with Dr. Jones, I think many of us agree what we saw during the last rainy season and this hurricane season on our fields was really devastating, obviously. We knew then that we had to replace the field. And I'm pretty shocked, actually, I want to give you props. Mr. Bass, because your initial estimate was about 2 million. You just kept throwing out, it's about 2 million. And I don't know if you actually did the full research on the price, cost, and the bidding and all that other kind of stuff. So, so kudos to you on that, you know, because you actually got just about there. Can you talk a little, I have a few questions here. Can you talk a little bit about some of the other bids or the other price points? Did you only look at Hellas, or did you look at other companies? And then what were some of the differences in the services that they can provide versus, and the costs?
We looked at three, and you know, when you look at it, it's like this material was very similar in the other two. One was a little step down, another one was pretty close. But they didn't have the other aspects to promote the safety, particularly this cushion, the wave, and then the temperature decreasing feel. I mean, that to me was the seller. You know, if you've ever been on turf during a hot time, you know, it's intense heat, and you know, that alone, I think will make all the difference in the world. So it was those type things that led us to that. Now, the other two were going to be a little cheaper. Yeah. One was going to be considerably cheaper, which was a red flag to me also. You know, at all my time of working facilities and school systems, you know, just because it's a low bid, when the low bid comes, my antennas go off. It's like, okay, why is it so low? And that was another reason too that also led us back to this. And then also, you know, to do this and to do it right, and looking at the track record and the other organizations that these people had been selected for and worked for, it was, you know, it was a no-brainer for Mr. Westerberger and I.
So, and just also, thank you for that. And then also so if anyone wants to kind of look at what those biddings were and what, they can always reach out to you and take a look at that as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The other thing and I'm not sure if you mentioned it, I don't think you just mentioned it, the other companies, did they also offer some of the extra beach volleyball areas? And no, it was just the field alone.
Just the field
okay.
alone.
So just so the community is aware, when you say that this is being charged because we weren't expecting this, right? This was kind of an emergency situation. If you saw the field, for anyone who did not see it, there are pictures and videos that Mr. Bass has of the field where there were, I mean, you walked in onto the field, it's just the water wasn't draining. It was just, it was slush.
I ruined a pair of shoes, yes.
Slush, slush, I don't even, you know, the sound of walking in water, right, on mud and dirt. And so, I don't know how to say that sound now. So there's a need there, and we've had to relocate our football field, our football games, to accommodate because of the issues with the football field. That said, when you did your research on how, because we weren't expecting this, it's not like it was budgeted, we don't have $2 million just sitting in a bucket somewhere ready to be spent. You, from what I'm told, and if you can just talk on this for a little bit, when you say that this is unspent money or old money, which is what you mentioned, what I believe for those who are listening, it's not that it's old money that we haven't spent, budgeted, or spent. It's that this money was budgeted for a particular capital thing in the past. We did not spend, if it was $500, for example, on, you know, repairing the bathroom faucet. We budgeted $500. The actual cost for it was $450. There's $50 extra. So it's that money that was that you all kind of realized where in all of these little buckets that there are all this unspent in terms of we budgeted for it, but we didn't actually spend it. We didn't need to spend it for those projects, past projects, and that's how we have $2 million. Where can we pull from that same process? Second part of my question, for fencing. So if you can talk a little bit about this unspent money, a little detailed so people understand what that is, so they don't think that we are not, I mean, we receive money, we need to spend it. But in this case,
So let me go to the first part there about where the money came from. Here are a couple examples. So the Gifford Middle School cow wall replacement, the contingency that we just talked about, is $394,000. When Mr. Westenberger, prior to me getting here and since I've been here, we budget out the 5-year work plan. We take what we think is the closest industry standard cost at the time. And because of inflation and fluctuating prices, I was thrilled when I got here that Mr. Westenberger followed the same practice I followed, always estimated on the high end. So you think about it, we're doing the 5-year work plan. Some of these projects Nick bid out or put on the pricing 5 years ago. So the Gifford, $394,000. Glendale cafeteria expansion that we just finished came back $316,000 in savings, or that we didn't spend. We had already budgeted $300,000 for the Citrus Bowl when we were talking about putting it back as natural surface. We had already also budgeted $204,000 for Vero Beach High School beach volleyball because we knew that was coming up. Then we had the Glendale cafeteria, some site work that we had put out for $200,000 that we'd already got it done, and we didn't have to spend $200,000 of it. It was overestimated. So those are the kind of things. And then the big one was Storm Grove exterior painting. 5 years ago, Nick put down $1 million in budget, and it just keeps repeating year after year. And we come back and looking at that, we can do that for $400,000. So there's $600,000 there.
So there's 2 million. I added it.
Yes. And then there's some nickel and dime stuff that gets us up, a couple $100,000 more.
Good job.
yeah.
That's Mr. Westenberger. I don't know. He said he was going to be
He's
here.
there.
Good
He's
job.
been critiquing everything you've said.
Okay. Yeah, that's Mr. Westenberger there.
No, he was going like this. I don't know what that meant, but.
He keeps Mr. Fagan pretty honest too on stuff. So
Well, in that case, it's good fiscal management. So I appreciate the detail because I don't think what you initially said, I don't think it actually gives prudence to, the real work of what that really looks like.
so can I go to the fencing now?
Yes.
Okay, so given my list here of where we've drawn from, we're pretty much tapped out. So, last year we would have small little things come up here and there, and I always go to Nick and say, well, I got a little bit of money I can take here and we can do this. I got a little bit I can take here and do this. To get us through this year, it's going to be tough when we have a little project that pops up that we want to get done. We'd have to wait till next fiscal year and do that. So money for fencing now, it would be tight. We have our safety and security dollars that, Mr. Teskey, Mr. Westenberger, they go through and they align that out as to what they need to get done this year, and the fencing was part of it, but cameras is another thing, some egress items or other items. I don't know exactly where we could find money this year for moving forward with fencing and bringing them up, but I feel like next fiscal year, knowing the board's pleasure moving in that direction, we would go ahead and start allocating that money to it.
So the board approves the 5-year capital budget. When it comes to us, we approve it. We do that through our what is most important for us in terms of the vision and the mission of the district and where our priorities are. We just approved our 5-year plan not long ago. So if we're making these adjustments, are these going to be amendments for this year? would they have to be would we have to receive an amendment to our 5-year plan this year? What happens there? Do we have to reapprove the 5-year plan? Because moving forward, if maintenance also comes out of the capital budget, or field, what you said, I think you said the field cost comes out of capital as well. So if replacing the sand or replacing, or just the general maintenance on these new fields, especially the new volleyball field, where does that come out of, and at what point do we update our capital budget?
Okay, so we don't have to update the capital 5-year plan because it wasn't budgeted money from revenue that we're getting for that particular project.
From revenue,
Yeah,
okay?
so again,
I gotcha.
and using just simple terms, it's that saved money. And for DOE's perspective, you don't have to indicate where that saved money is coming from to do your project. So if we
But
were.
it's got to be recorded somewhere,
Well, it'll be
your
recorded through our
financials.
finance system.
okay?
Yeah. And approved through you guys'
Improved,
record.
okay. And what about the upkeep and the maintenance of the fields?
That would be in the budget moving
That
forward.
would be in the budget moving forward.
Yes.
Now, would that be because we didn't plan for this extra volleyball field, this extra beach volleyball field? Would that be an extra burden on our budget moving forward? What I don't want us to do, which I think is incredibly important to do as much as we can for our athletics department, which it is a priority for us because kids who are involved in sports, we know, have a greater ability, I suppose, to succeed in life, and obviously we know all of that stuff.
So-
But what I don't see us doing is putting as much effort in our vocational training and our technical, training programs for kids. So I want us to keep in mind, and again, this might not be the place for us to have that conversation, but with as much effort as we are putting into our athletics, I want us to continue that same effort in putting priority onto our vocational training programs as well.
Going back to the maintenance, this is going to be a savings to the budget because with beach volleyball, that's the beautiful thing about this sport. There's not a lot of maintenance that has to be done. Some raking is really your biggest maintenance, is raking holes in. And then if you go to the artificial surface, you don't have the mowing, you don't have the fertilizer, you don't have the mole cricket baits, you don't have the irrigation concerns. So it's a savings also annually.
Okay, and board members, bear with me for one more question with regard to the new beach volleyball. What about bathrooms in that area for?
They would utilize the
W.
small gym at the Flick, those restrooms. And that's why we put it there, is because, Brooks, can you go back to that? Google Earth? Is you would have parking there. You would have, there's a fence, a secure fence, and then you'll be able to go into just a short walk to the gymnasium there for the restrooms.
And since we're on the topic of fencing, would that be a fenced-in, it's not an open court, right? Are we going to have fencing, anything around there that's keeping that area safe from weekend use and so on and so
Yeah,
forth?
it's all fenced in there.
It's already fenced?
Go down a little bit more, Brooks. Nope, the other down. There you go. All right, now zoom in right there where the courts are going to be. Okay. All right, so you can see there looks like either a Connex storage unit right there in the parking lot, but that's the fence line, then it makes a 90-degree angle. So all of that is the perimeter fenced. And individuals would be able to, as you would drive into the Flick for the parents pick up and drop off at the
Yep.
Flick, you would park in that parking lot and then go down a little bit more, Brooks. Yep. And you see the Flick gym, that's where they would go to the restrooms at, right there.
I mean, you can't see a fence on here, but there is a fence around it. That's
Yes, ma'am.
okay.
And I just.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dr.
I
Moore.
just wanted to add, you all tonight are receiving $759,000 that's going to be used for a nursing program at Treasure Technical Coast, and $113,000, which is going to be
Grants,
used
yeah.
for enhanced welding. So point taken that we're actively seeking on both sides. We're going to schedule some ribbon cutting, for lack of a better way of saying it, just to bring awareness about some of the great things that are happening at Treasure Coast Technical as well as other CTE programs across the district.
Thank you.
And as a board member, Dr. Moore and Mr. Bass, obviously, we pulled a couple things. You know, I would want to see, like, if we're going to do this, what does it affect? I want to make sure I can see the overall picture, so that helps me quite a bit.
Dr. Jones, I have one
Yes.
other comment. Brooks, do you mind pulling it back up to look at the field for a second? So one thing I noticed when I was sitting in the end zone for the last couple of games, I was sitting on that side. You see the parking lot on the opposite side? There are a lot of people that like to park there, keep their headlights on so they can see the field. The problem is, I was on the field level as a player, they're looking right into those headlights. You don't have that problem at Sebastian River. There are no
Right.
parking lots on either side. I get that people want to be able to see the football field without going in. The problem is the headlights, I can tell were a real problem for, and I'm surprised we haven't heard from the players about that.
Yeah, I am too. You know, a lot of high schools and colleges or whatever will put windscreen up.
Right.
And, you know, I don't know what kind of an appetite Vero Beach High School has to do that, but it cuts down on, you know, lights. It cuts down on people watching from the outside, not paying to get in. You know, it'd be something that we could look at, but the easy solution for what you had just said is we need to make sure that, you know, staff is aware of that and maybe get help from the sheriff's department to make sure people cut lights off. Just like if you're at a baseball game, you pull up to a
Yep.
baseball game and somebody pulls up with the lights on in the outfield and everybody on the field turns around and says, turn your lights off.
Right.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, I could see that that was a distraction, or, you know, get sponsors to put up fences, you know, the boards on the fences.
All right. Mr. Barefoot, I'm sorry.
One more comment. This is for anybody that's listening. There's always an opportunity to have your name put on the Citrus Bowl.
There you go.
So if we want to free up some of this 2-3 million, or the volleyball courts for that matter. I mean, I know that FTX name's being removed from the Dolphin Stadium because FTX is no more, but anybody that has an interest in, for a certain amount of money, having it become the XYZ Citrus Bowl, that opportunity presents itself, and for obviously a much lesser amount of money, you can put your name on the volleyball courts. So everyone and all your contacts in the community, and obviously we've been talking to a lot of folks about the Vero Beach Community Complex and naming opportunities within the context of that project. But here's two more big ones. For $1 million, we'd be happy to put somebody's name alongside the Citrus Bowl. So keep that in mind.
Thank you, Mr. Barefoot. And next.
all right, next item is what we've already referred to a little bit about the Gifford Middle School Cal-Wall final retention payment. Florida statute, you have to hold out 10% retainage for the contractor, holds their feet to the hot fire to make sure everything gets finished. And I apologize for not having this to you in enough time, so it did not have to be an amendment. We had it ready in October, and we changed things up for the November board meeting, really didn't bring any items, and then completely forgot about putting it on, so I apologize for that. But this is payment that goes to Summit Construction that they are due for $98,000. So we'll bring that to you tonight for approval.
Any questions?
No, may I
Yes, ma'am.
go back? I want to go back to the other one real quick. There's a correction, I think, that on number 13, it is on page 5. It's talking about public records. It actually has our public records custodian's name there. I'm not sure her name is needed when we can just say Public Records Department and then put the public records email as opposed to her work email.
That's on the turf,
Yes.
page 13,
Page 5, number 13.
5, number 13. Okay, we will definitely look
Thank
at
you.
that.
Thank you, Ms. Rosario. And Mr. Bass, are you next?
I got one more. And this one is, and my computer is dying, so I don't have any idea what I'm looking at now. But we have policy 9200, which is for volunteers. And I just would like to say this, the way that this reads now is much more conducive to the operation that takes place in a school. It is much more inclusive of parents. And, you know, in reading the policy the first time, I thought, wow, you know, we're really taxing, figuratively and literally, individuals who want to go on a field trip with their kid. So the way it reads now is, and I'm just going to go off of kind of memory, is if you are volunteering at your child's school and you are going to be in a position where you are supervised or in close proximity of a school staff member, all you have to do is go through the Raptor check at schools, which compares you by your driver's license against the sexual predator registry, okay? If you're going to be in a situation where you're going to be a school volunteer and you will not have any school staff there as supervisory, or if you're going to be on an overnight trip, or if you're going to go off on a field trip and you're going to be assigned 3 kids and you take them off in this direction, you have to go through the level 2 background screening, which is where you come in and get your fingerprints done. The cost of that is $43 for the prints, $43.75, and then it's a $24 retention fee if you want to have them retained for 5 years. Again, this is going to make great strides to get parental involvement, I feel like, in our school system.
Dr. Pasa, we'll start with you.
Why does it cost so much? What's the breakdown of the cost?
That is a fee assessed to us. I mean, we're not making any money off of it. So it is a fee assessed to us, and it is through the, you have different vendors that you use. They're all the same pricing, but it goes into the big clearinghouse database that we're required to use by DOE. And then the retention is $24. So was it $3-4 and change for each year? So, and you can retain them for up to 5 years.
So the initial process to fingerprint them, we actually send that somewhere and it has a cost.
Yeah, so
The 40, what was it, $49?
the
$43.70.
43.75.
So how does it cost that much, I guess? Where exactly is the fee for that? Because we have the ability to fingerprint people at our district building, right?
Mm-hmm.
So does it cost $43 to fingerprint them?
It doesn't, well, that's the fee that we're assessed by
The state.
the approved vendor
Okay.
that we have to send them to.
Okay. So it's
It doesn't cost us 43
Yeah,
to
yeah.
do it, but it's the fee that we're assessed.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't communicate that very good the first time around.
You did. I just didn't fully understand
Okay.
it. You're good.
That price has actually come down. Here's the problem with it, and I have a real problem with this. If you are, for example, myself, I was fingerprinted in St. Lucie County, became a board member here, I was fingerprinted here, I had to pay both of them the fees. Even though I was already in the system, I had to pay it again. I have brought this up to Senator Grahl. When she was Representative Grahl, she realizes it's a big problem. It's a problem across the state, and she mentioned to me that she's interested in doing a statewide system where once you're in the system, your fingerprints are good for wherever you volunteer, which I think would be helpful for volunteers across the line. If we get that, we'll be able to get more volunteers because they volunteer somewhere else, they can volunteer here as long as they're in the system. So I would like to add that to our legislative priorities and push it with FSBA, because it's going to be beneficial to all school districts if we have this universal fingerprinting where people go into the system, and then once you're in the system, you can be looked at wherever you are. It's kind of like the national fingerprint system that they have for FBI. So it's kind of the same thing. Once you're in the system, you don't have to pay every time you want to go volunteer at a different organization. I think it'd just be beneficial for us, if that's okay.
Do you mind
with
if I
us.
make one comment real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Pasa.
The reason I was asking about the cost is I'm just concerned there's a lot of parents that may want to volunteer, but the cost might prohibit it, and I think ultimately we obviously want parental participation. I think that's huge. But if you think for some people, $75 or whatever it was might be a little bit steep.
There is a provision in the policy that if it falls in a hardship, then if funds are available at that school,
Okay.
in an account, the school can cover that for them.
That's a good point. Mr. Barefoot?
I have nothing.
Ms. Rosario?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that we have this now before us. I brought this up, obviously, board members, as you know, as a concern a few months ago. The volunteer, I'm glad that this has now been revised. I'm glad that we now understand what is required of us. I do see some benefit in having a statewide place for volunteers or for others to have fingerprinting where they don't have to pay multiple times within a certain period of time. But I caution, maybe they'd have to get re-fingerprinted with no cost. That's what I would recommend, because what happens, I don't know how these platforms work, but someone who was fingerprinted to volunteer 3 months ago, a month ago, comes to our district, wants to volunteer in our district. Within the last 30 days, they have done something illegal that, or has committed a sexual offense, a crime against children somehow or another. Would that automatically come up if they just come? I don't know all of that. So that hasn't come before us, so I don't know if I would want to make that a priority for us yet until we have more conversation. I'd rather have that conversation with law enforcement so that we understand all the parameters around that discussion before making it a legislative priority for us, although I can see the benefit, the general benefit of that. The other thing is, we do have it in this policy that if there is a financial burden or financial hardship, the district will cover the cost, so I'm glad that you mentioned that. And of course, that's only for the opportunities if you are going to be alone with those children. You only need to get fingerprinted if you're going to be in a situation where you take your kids to Disney, a day to Disney, and the teacher assigns you a certain amount as a parent volunteer, you a certain amount of kids, the teacher has a certain amount, and you kind of go around through the park. Like in that situation, you're alone with children. You're not with a supervised, certified teacher or staff member from the school, so you have to have your fingerprinting. As you mentioned, overnight trips, but otherwise, the Raptor would be the only thing that's required, and there's no cost for that. The only thing that I would like as a follow-up, and I'm hoping board members would agree, is that every time we create a policy, we're supposed to have a procedure that is attached to that policy. We don't have the procedure here. We just have the policy. How this actually gets implemented, really needs to be outlined as procedure connected to this, obviously, and there are laws that are tied to this as well. So in terms of procedure, if you are planning a trip, an overnight trip, we need to have a timeline to allow parents enough time to come in and get that fingerprinting. That's the part that we can't do an overnight trip and expect parents to just show up the next day. They have to make arrangements, human resources has to be available. I don't want that to be a hardship either, and if they can't get in, then they can't go on the trip. Obviously, teachers would need to plan, schools would need to plan for these trips where this fingerprinting is necessary. And what kind of proof are you asking for a parent to say that there's a hardship? Is it just going to be their word? I would hope that it's just their word rather than causing another hardship on parents when they just want to volunteer with their kids.
Right.
So all of that, I think, needs to be I have shared this. It needs to be outlined in a procedure that is connected to this. We did have one at one point. Those were removed from board docs. So now that we have a revised policy, maybe we can come back around to what that procedure would be. The other part of this is also on here, which we haven't addressed, is the policy 9211. So I'm glad that this was, is it this one? Hold on.
So we looked at that after our briefing, and we felt like it referenced more to 2430.01, which is the other one
Yep.
that's attached there.
Yep.
And we referenced policy 9200 in that.
Yep, that's what I was looking at the wrong one. So, board members, we do have a policy 9211, which is regarding community relations, parent organizations, booster club, outside support organizations. All of those are considered volunteer and what they do for the schools. So what I requested was that there would be a mention in this that they follow the same policy in terms of volunteering. And then this one that Mr. Bass just brought up, 2430, was found, and of course, adding the policy for volunteers to it would kind of give us consistency throughout all of these policies, so I appreciate that. I'm glad.
Dr. Chen.
Right. Yes, go ahead, then I'll
Follow-up.
say something.
I have a
after that.
follow-up to what was said.
Okay.
As far as the legislative priority for fingerprinting, I am going to ask for this to be brought up in January for us to vote on. I do understand Ms. Rosario's concerns about, people that have been fingerprinted and then may have committed a crime. We know from kind of some alerts that the board members have gotten over the last week or so that we're very aware when somebody commits a crime that there's now a procedure that it goes in because of fingerprinting. If they've been fingerprinted, it shows up. So even if you've been fingerprinted in the past, those things show up. So I'll make sure that we put the wording in there for the priority to make sure that that's included. I do know I have discussed that with our representative in the past about that concern, and she's very aware of that. So I do want to put this as one of our legislative priorities. I will give it to you, Dr. Moore, to make sure that we vote on it in January so that when I go to Tallahassee, I have that in front of me.
May I
Alrighty.
follow up? May I follow up?
Yeah, I haven't talked yet. Let
Okay,
me go
sorry.
first, if you don't mind. Thank you.
That's fine.
When we started looking at all these policies, we all had the email where a parent was just struggling with getting, and I know communication goes to the superintendent, so I sent it to the superintendent, and the principal followed up on that. And I understand this new policy, and I appreciate it. If you're in sight of the teacher, okay, just the Raptor, and if not, you go through the level 2. And I know that could be expensive. I was a high school principal when Jessica Lunsford was implemented, so just as a board, I will be there for any parent who wants to volunteer and everything looks good. But man, oh man, if we don't do that and something happens, we are 100% liable. So I like where we're going with this. I agree with what Ms. Berenborg said as far as getting this legislative-wise. I mean, even when I had back here as executive director of secondary, had to be re-fingerprinted. But maybe there could be something where it goes for 4 or 5 years. I don't know. And as far as policies and procedures, I think we've talked about this before, and Dr. Moore might be bringing this up after we talk about protocols and so forth. But policy 103001, the school board delegates to the superintendent the authority to determine whether administrative procedures will be needed to implement each of the policies adopted by the board. So we delegate that to the superintendent. And even going through Chapter 120 in Florida statute upon the recommendation of the superintendent. I agree, some policies need procedures, 100%, but not all policies need procedures. So we'd have to bring that together as a board, and then, again, that goes through the superintendent. All procedures should be consistent with the adopted policies, and shall describe the manner in which those policies are to be implemented. So that's something we'll have to talk about as a board as to whether, and this one may need a procedure. I don't know, but it's something we talk about as the board. Ms. Rosario.
That's exactly my point.
Good.
That's exactly
I thought
why
you
I
said all policies need procedures.
No.
Okay.
All
I thought that's what you said.
policies that are tied to, all procedures that are tied to a policy, a state statute, or federal law must come before the board for adoption. So, yeah. The other thing that I was going to say is regarding the legislative priorities, I was going to piggyback off of what Mrs. Berenborg mentioned. Legislative priorities are set by the board corporate, all of us, to agree and to vote on them. Our priorities are not based on just one board member's
That's why I said I'm
choice.
bringing it up in
So-
January, Ms.
as I'm still talking. So it would have to come to us all for a vote before we agree to whatever our priorities are going to be. And if we engage in that conversation, I'd like to have law enforcement here to have that discussion with regard to fingerprinting and whatever that process is, so we have further, or even, maybe even, Mr. Thornton, Deputy Thornton, somebody here to give us the legal perspective. You don't have to have this conversation now.
No,
I
I-
just
we
wanted to
don't.
make
Just,
that
just
comment.
at a level of clarity, after we close the book, as we call it, on this board meeting this evening, we will shift in our individual meetings. We'll start to talk through what were the previous legislative priorities. Is there anything to add? For those of you who've been on the board, very familiar with the process, we'll come back in January, as Ms. Berenborg was referencing, to pull them all together, and then ultimately that evening have it for a vote. So this board, the board proper, has its legislative priorities. So that's on the to-do list starting as soon as we close this board meeting.
All righty, what's next, Dr. Moore?
Mr. Bass, are you?
I'm done now.
All right, thank you, sir. It's a very brief item. I've spoken to a few of you, just wanted to assess the board's interest in going through what would be a one-day training through the FSBA Master Board Training. We went through 2 years ago when the prior board was established, the full training. As you recall, that was, I think, 3 or 4 separate full-day or half-day sessions. This would just require a one-day session with the new configuration of the board. So, Dr. Jones, if you facilitate a conversation, if there is an interest from the board, I could work with Nancy to determine possible dates.
All righty, I'd just like to begin with, I think it's a good idea. Dr. Posca, we went through master board training. I think we were the first board to complete that. Am I right?
No,
Nope.
Oh, no.
there were other boards who did it.
Before? Okay. I don't
You mean
remember
in our
that as-
district?
Yeah, in the district.
No, in our district, we were the first.
Okay, that's, I meant, yeah, that's, I don't mean the state. We were really good, though. And then we went through protocols, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But one thing, when I was at the Chairmanship Academy, and I did learn a few things during that time, and I love to learn. They talked about the superintendent-board relationship and how that positive relationship, not that we agree on everything, that dialogue back and forth really, really is good for student achievement. So I personally would like to do a one-day training just to get, Dr. Posca up to date. And it also sometimes it will bring up other things we want to discuss or other areas that maybe we have a concern about. But that's my opinion, so I'd like to hear from everybody. What do you think, Dr. Posca?
What is the master board training?
How do you describe that?
Well, it's been different years.
Oh, yeah, it's different. As somebody who's had several leadership positions, I thought it was really good to review what, our main responsibilities are. How to treat people. We did that through protocol. What it is as far as what our overall goal is. And we align everything we can do to our strategic plan, which is student achievement. Mr. Barefoot brought that up one day. If it's not related to student achievement directly or indirectly, is this something we should be talking about? It just keeps the focus on what we need to do, especially in an era right now where a lot of things kind of get us off topic. It keeps our focus on the children. And like I said, as a former principal and many other positions, it kept my focus on where I needed to be, letting the superintendent run the district day to day, letting the principals run the schools day to day, and what our overall responsibility is. But that's just my opinion.
So that just to give a little structure on the day, it is the 5 board members and myself, facilitated by a trainer from FSBA.
Yeah.
They work with us to identify what the specific topics would be that we would select to work with them. So it's a one-day training, protocol-driven, as Ms. Doc Jones said, new chair. Really to work through and ensure that the board and the superintendent are working cohesively in the best interest of children.
Ms. Berenborg, what are your thoughts?
Oh, definitely.
Okay. Mr. Barefoot?
Ditto.
Ms. Rosario?
I have concerns. I don't know if the board training that we had, master board training, was as high quality as I expected. Over the several meetings that we had for the master board training, there were some items that were just, some were good takeaways. A discussion around what protocols are for board members was a good one, and we since created our own board protocols, and they're just expectations for behavior, essentially. But we didn't create our board protocols with FSBA, we did that on our own.
Well, they started
So-
us with it. They got us going on it. I remember that.
So, we didn't really use FSBA for that. I would say that I'm pretty, I did not realize that this last FSBA conference would be the way that it was. I was pretty disappointed in the setup of the last one as well. They were trying to charge for even the pre-conference. It was like everything was a charge as opposed to being all-inclusive. And it was just strange. It was just a different feel. I know this was your first FSBA conference. Usually the general sessions are more interesting and more applicable in terms of my opinion, you know, in terms of what board members can come away with. I wasn't blown away this time around. There's a cost here as well that you all need to take a look at. For members, for districts with membership, it's $1,800. I'm not quite sure. I'm convinced that doing this second round of board training is going to be worth the $1,800. And so I would just say, no, there's no need for master board reinstatement, not for us. We're going to have a board protocols discussion on our own here. So I would rather us save the $1,800 and use it towards something academically focused, more driven for, you know, student learning rather than for us. That's my opinion.
All right, there's three of us. What do you think, Dr. Pasca? Ms. Rosario says no.
What if we go bowling instead?
Not at a facility
do
we
that.
Or
own.
take this?
Sunshine law.
What was that? I didn't even.
No, he said, what if we go bowling instead?
Oh,
I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that, Dr. Moore. I just think absolutely that, you know, we continue to push forward is going to be good because, you know, today I think it's a good workshop. We're moving forward. We know that we have to keep focused on our strategic plan, so we could certainly talk about that.
Absolutely.
All right, what's next?
Your item, ma'am.
All right. I wanted to bring up protocols as a newly elected chair, just to say a few notes. I reviewed everything. And we can also review protocols at certain times if we decide to do that. But going back to how this started, we took about part of 3 meetings. Dr. Jacobs was our wonderful facilitator. And there was a consensus to agree to support these protocols. And that it was a lot of discussion, a lot of dialogue. I think good information. The chair runs the meeting with Robert's rules, and Ms. Shattuck, you're the parliamentarian, and I'm going to tell you right now, if I make a mistake, say something. The amendment to the bifurcation, blah, 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 okay? Say it, okay? Because I'm just going to kind of keep focused on what we need to do. I am going to ask you, please raise your hand to be recognized. I wanted to be in the middle so I could see left and right as much as I could. And I know in workshops that's not easy to do. You just want to say it. But if you, I just don't want to have someone be interrupted. Now, the chair can interrupt or anyone can call the question, but just so everybody has time to speak about what they want to say. I think it's very, very important that we model what we expect. You know, tonight when we have citizen input, we listen. If anyone wants to say anything after citizen input, that's fine, but there's no dialogue back and forth. And I think I said this last time, you know, we can always disagree, and we can do so with respect, and that's something we need to model. Keep the focus on strategic plan. In a business meeting, if a board member is presenting, they have 10 minutes, and then we'll do a round robin and keep it going until everything is settled or the chair calls on it or a question is called. But again, just getting information to people so they have time to speak. One thing I think is really important, and this kind of goes both ways, Dr. Moore. When we put the agenda out there, and we give our public 7 days' notice. We should really try to stick to that. Now, I know sometimes personnel items come up, and you want to get them on the agenda for approval for the principals, but we really, really need to stick to that as much as possible. And then a change could be made for good cause, determined by the person designated to preside. Obviously, you can move, once the agenda comes out, you can move things from consent to action. I guess just in general, you know, just no last-minute items unless it's truly an emergency. The chair has the sole authority to call on people to speak, and again, I'll be looking both ways. And if I'm missing you, just raise your hand. If you could, I could just, it helps me. Let me think what else. I want to thank Ms. Berenborg. You put together with Nancy the books we have on the dais with the protocols and Robert's Rule of Orders. I think that's very, very important. And I said before with, you know, our relationship with the superintendent is something that's very, very important. Not that we agree on everything, but just we know where we're going with student achievement. I think that's about it, all I have as a chair, but any other comments just on protocols in general? Yes, Ms. Berenborg.
If you look at page 4, the second to last bullet, it says board members may add items to board meeting agendas for action or discussion through the superintendent 8 days prior to the meeting. There was an item that I gave to the superintendent verbally. We discussed it a couple of times. I didn't put in writing because of the nature of the item, but it did not get on tonight's agenda. And I did talk to him about it today, so he is going to bring it up at the beginning of the meeting tonight. In the future, I will put that in writing, but this one was a little sensitive. It's about safety and security. So I did talk to him about it, want to have conversations with him prior to putting that on the agenda.
So the superintendent is aware.
Oh, yeah.
That's the biggest thing. Again, I know sometimes things come up with personnel. We want to get the teachers in the classroom or any other positions hired, but nobody's here to create hidden agendas. I mean, we're all here for the same thing. Dr. Moore, do you want to add to that, or even the superintendent? Obviously, superintendent responsibilities are all in policy, but do you want to add anything to that?
No, to be very honest, I continue to be very encouraged in terms of the 2 brief meetings that we've had, keywords, brief. I think our work is complex, and I think the opportunity for us to connect in ways that ensure that we are putting students first is the absolute basis for all the work that we do. So having the opportunity really to have these open conversations, whether it is a board facilitated by FSBA, protocol training, or whatever we say the topic is, there's more than one way to skin a cat, that we continue to have these conversations. In terms of items, my staff knows there's not going to be opportunities not to have information posted the 8 days, the week in advance, so that is a structure. I think today, we do have one item, and there's probably 5 items since I've been here, in which we've actually added after the agenda has been posted. Personnel, we've typically done, it's a historical perspective that we added those on the Friday, and you're right, we've done that just to ensure that we have everyone in place when we're supposed to have everybody in place. So we do that, but if that's not the desire of the board, we obviously can post it, but that would keep people from servicing children in a significant amount of time. So there's always, we should anticipate always having an update on personnel to ensure that we have as much information as possible. I do think my job is to implement policy. That is my job. That's all that I do. And I think the way that Ms. Rosario said it, the way that Doc Jones said it, is spot on. When there are opportunities to have a procedure that is required by law, then you need to have that specific procedure in place. That's not the daily operations or the ins and outs of running the school system. If that was the case, the policy book would be a mile high, because that's all that I do is enforce and uphold policy. So being very specific, so I'll have that conversation with each of you in regards to policy versus procedure, so we're all on the same page. And then we'll probably bring that back as a discussion in our next workshop to ensure we are all on the exact same page. As I hear it and receive it through today's discussion, I think that we are. But I just want to have a conversation to ensure that absolutely we are.
Mr. Zario, add anything?
Yeah, I would like to come back to the board protocols. This was created with a different board. Clearly, we now have a new board member, Dr. Posca, and his input in terms of what he would like to be added or removed. I'd love to hear his feedback in terms of how these protocols are written. You have them in front of you, Dr. Posca, I think. They are available online, and if we can come back to another workshop where we can address this and then get feedback, there might be some things that may have come up that we're like, you know what, that's not working for us anymore, let's just remove it, or let's tweak it, let's change it. I know that I not long ago had an item that you and I talked about that didn't make the agenda and posting that you knew of. It was probably like 2 or 3 days into the 7-day, and it was denied by the board chair because it wasn't done before the 7 or 8 days. So I have concerns about tonight's item. If tonight's item is not an emergency, we have protocols and we have procedures that say that it should be 8 days in advance. So
It was 8 days.
it should, if it should,
It's a discussion.
if it would be, if we're going to be consistent, then we need to be consistent with all. So it's a shame that it wasn't put on there, but neither was my item in the past. Plus, there needs to be a vote. If anything
Through the
needs
chair,
to be put,
there's not a vote, it is a
No.
discussion.
if something needs
It
to
needs
be
to be
added.
absolutely.
It needs to be
Absolutely.
voted in. There needs to be a second, there needs to be a vote to be added to the agenda, Robert's rules. That's where I stand on that.
So are you going to bring it in as discussion?
Yes, it is the opportunity to have discussion, correct?
So it's going to be added as a discussion, not a voting item?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. One thing I just want to, and then I'll be finished, the standards for boardmanship, again, this is policy 0123. Couple things really stand out to me is work with the superintendent, neither undermining nor intruding into the areas legally assigned to the school administration. And I think that's very important as far as a board member that, you know, you're the CEO and you've got the day-to-day, and obviously you implement policy. I think that's important. And I think that's it for me on that one. All right. Anything else on protocols? Good. All right, where are we next here, Mr.?
You slam the gavel.
So any other information from any board member? Okay, this workshop is finished at 1:52. We're adjourned.